Good morning. Well, today I'm back with my Bear reading of the Bear Act of Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. So, I've already introduced myself in the last video. So, I'm gonna start here now. Introduction. I'll start with the introduction. The introduction says the Vienna Accord of 1994 and the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action 1995 have acknowledged that Domestic Violence Act is undoubtedly a human rights issue. The United Nations Committee on Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in its general recommendations has recommended that the state party should act to protect women against the violence of any kind, especially that occurring within the family. The phenomenon of domestic violence in India is widely prevalent but has remained invisible in the public domain. The civil law does not address this phenomenon in its entirety. Presently, where a woman is subjected to cruelty by her husband or his relatives, it is an offence under Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code. In order to provide a remedy in the civil law for the protection of women from being victims of domestic violence and to prevent the occurrence of domestic violence in the society, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Bill was introduced in the Parliament. Now, coming to Statement of Object and Reasons. Domestic violence is undoubtedly a human rights issue and a serious deterrent to development. The Vienna Accord of 1994 and the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action 1995 have acknowledged this. The United Nations Committee on Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW it is called, in its General Recommendation number 12, 1989, has recommended that the state party should not act to protect women against violence of any kind, especially that occurring within the family. The phenomenon of domestic violence is widely prevalent but has remained largely invisible in the public domain. Presently, where a woman is subjected to cruelty by her husband or his relatives, it is an offence under Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code. The civil law does not, however, address this phenomenon in its entirety. It is therefore proposed to enact a law keeping in view the rights guaranteed under Article 14, 15, and 21 of the Constitution to provide for a remedy under the civil law which is intended to protect the women from being the victims of domestic violence and to protect the occurrence of domestic violence in the society. The bill, inter alia, seeks to provide for the following. 1. Roman 1. It covers those women who are or have been in a relationship with the abuser where both parties have lived together in a shared household and are related by consanguinity, marriage, or through a relationship in the nature of marriage or adoption. In addition, relationships with family members living together as a joint family are also included. Even those women who are sisters, widows, mothers, single women, or living with the abuser are entitled to legal protection under the proposed legislation. However, whereas the bill enables the wife or the female living in a relationship in the nature of marriage to file a complaint under the proposed enactment against any relative of the husband or the male partner, it does not enable any female relative of the husband or the male partner to file a complaint against the wife or the female partner. Second, it defines the expression of domestic violence to include actual abuse or threat or abuse that is physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, or economic. Harassment by way of unlawful dowry demands to the woman or her relatives would also be covered under this definition. Third, it provides for the rights of women to secure housing. It also provides for the right of a woman to reside in matrimonial home or shared household, whether or not she has any title or rights in such home or household. Thus, this right is secured by a residence order which is passed by the magistrate. Fourth, it empowers the magistrate to pass protection orders in favor of the aggrieved party to prevent the respondent from aiming or committing an act of domestic violence or any other specified act entering a workplace, or any other place frequented by the aggrieved person attempting to communicate with her, isolating any assets used by both the parties, and causing violence to the aggrieved party, her relatives, or others who provide her assistance from the domestic violence. Now, fifth, that's the last, it provides for appointment of protection officers and registration of non governmental organizations as service providers for providing assistance to a aggrieved person with respect to her medical examination, obtaining legal aid, safe shelter, etc. Lastly, the bill seeks to achieve the above objects. The notes on clause above explain the various provisions contained in the bill. This is an Act 43 of 2005, the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Bill, having been passed by the Houses of Parliament, received the assent of President of India on 13 September 2005. It came on the statute book as the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005, Act 43 of 2005, and it came into force on 26th October 2006. Now we'll start with the law enacted. So it starts with a preliminary. That's the short title, extent, and commencement. This act may be called the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. Second, it extends to the whole of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Third, it shall come into force on such date as the central government may by notification in the official gazette appoint. Second is for definitions. Under Domestic Violence Act, there are various definitions which are defined. A. Aggrieved person. B. Child. C. Compensation order. D. Custody order. E. Domestic incident report. F. Domestic relationship. Now, domestic relationship is also very important. A lot of things are included in it. G. Domestic violence. H. Dowry. I. Magistrate. J. Medical facility. K. Monetary relief. L. Notification. M. Prescribed. N. Protection officer. O. Protection order. P. Residence order. Q. Respondent. R. Service provider. S. Shared household. T. Shelter home. Now coming to section 3, which is on domestic violence, chapter 2. Definition of domestic violence. For the purpose of this act, any act, omission, or commission or conduct of the respondent shall constitute domestic violence in case it harms or injures or endangers the health, safety, life, limb, or well-being, whether mental or physical, of the aggrieved person, or tends to do so, and includes causing physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal and emotional abuse, and economic abuse. Or B. Harnesses, harms, injures, or endangers the aggrieved person with a view to coerce her or any other person related to her to meet any unlawful demand for any dowry or other property or valuable security. Or C. Has the effect of threatening the aggrieved person or any person related to her by any conduct mentioned in clause A or clause B. Or D. Otherwise injures or causes harm, whether physical or mental, to the aggrieved person. Now there's an explanation. For the purpose of this section, physical abuse has been defined, sexual abuse has been defined, verbal and emotional abuse has been defined, insults, repeated threats have been defined, economic abuse has been defined, and this ends section 3. Now coming to chapter 3, which is on powers and duties of protection officers, service providers, etc. Section 4 says information to protection officer and exclusion of liability of informant. Any person who has reason to believe that an act of domestic violence has been or is being or is likely to be committed may give information about it to the concerned protection officer. Second, no liability, civil or criminal, shall be incurred by any person for giving in good faith of information for the purpose of subsection 1. Now section 5. Duties of police officers, service providers, and magistrate. A police officer, protection officer, service provider, or magistrate who has received a complaint of domestic violence or is otherwise present at the place of an incident of domestic violence or when the incident of domestic violence is reported to him shall inform the aggrieved person of a right to make an application for obtaining a relief by way of protection order, an order for monetary relief, a custody order, a residence order, a compensation order, or more than one such order under this Act, of the availability of services of service providers, of the availability of services of protection officers, of a right to free legal services under Legal Services Authority Act 1987, of a right to file a complaint under Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code wherever relevant. Now, Section 6, duties of shelter homes. If an aggrieved person or on her behalf a protection officer or a service provider requests that the person in charge of a shelter home to provide shelter to her, such person in charge of the shelter home shall provide shelter to the aggrieved person in the shelter home. Section 7, duties of medical facilities. If an aggrieved person or on her behalf a protection officer or service provider requests the person in charge of a medical facility to provide any medical aid to her, such person in charge of the medical facility shall provide medical aid to the aggrieved person in the medical facility. Section 8, appointment of protection officers. The state government shall, by notification, appoint such number of protection officers in each district as it may consider necessary, and shall also notify the area or areas within which a protection officer shall exercise the powers and perform duties conferred on him or under this Act. Second, the protection officer shall, as far as possible, be women and shall possess such qualifications and experience as may be prescribed. 3. The terms and conditions of service of the protection officer and the other officers subordinate to him shall be such as may be prescribed. Now, Section 9, duties and functions of protection officers. It shall be the duty of the protection officer to assist the magistrate in discharge of his functions under this Act, to make a domestic incident report to the magistrate in such form and in such manner as may be prescribed upon receipt of complaint of domestic violence, and forward copies thereof to the police officer in charge of the police station within the local limits of whose jurisdiction domestic violence is alleged to have been committed, and to the service providers in that area, to make an application in such form and in such manner as may be prescribed to the magistrate, if the aggrieved person so desires, claiming relief for issuance of a protection order. D. To ensure that the aggrieved person is provided legal aid under the Legal Services Authority Act 1987 and make available free of cost the prescribed form in which a complaint is to be made. E. To maintain a list of all service providers providing legal aid or counseling, shelter homes, and medical facilities in a local area within the jurisdiction of the magistrate. To make available a safe shelter home if the aggrieved person so requires, and forward a copy of his report of having lodged the aggrieved person in shelter home to the police station and magistrate having jurisdiction in the area where the shelter home is situated. To get the aggrieved person medically examined if she has sustained bodily injuries, and forward a copy of the medical report to the police station and the magistrate having jurisdiction in the area where the domestic violence is alleged to have been taken place. H. To ensure that the order of monetary relief under Section 20 is complied with and executed in accordance with the procedure prescribed under the CRPC 1973. Lastly, to perform such of other duties as may be prescribed. Now, the protection officer shall be under the control and supervision of the magistrate and shall perform the duties imposed on him by magistrate and the government or under this act. Now, Section 10, service providers. Subject to such rules as may be made in this behalf, any voluntary association registered under Society Registration Act 1860 or a company registered under Companies Act 1956 or any other law for the time being in force with the objective of protecting the rights and interests of women by any lawful means, including providing of free legal aid, medical, financial, or other assistance, shall register itself with state government as a service provider for the purpose of this act. A service provider registered under subsection 1 shall have the power to record the domestic incident reported in the prescribed form if the aggrieved person so desires, and forward a copy thereof to the magistrate and protection officer having jurisdiction in the area where the domestic violence took place. Get the aggrieved person medically examined and forward a copy of the medical report to the protection officer and the police station within the local limits of which the domestic violence took place. Ensure that the aggrieved party is provided shelter in shelter home if she so requires, and forward a report of the lodging of the aggrieved person in the shelter home to the police station within the local limits of which the domestic violence took place. Lastly, no suit, prosecution, or other legal proceedings shall lie against any service provider or any member of the service provider who is deemed to be acting or purporting to act under this act for anything which is in good faith done or intended to be done in exercise of powers of discharge of functions under this act towards the prevention of commission of domestic violence. Now, Section 11, duties of government. The central government and every state government shall take all measures to ensure that a. the provisions of this act are given wide publicity through public media, including the television, radio, and the print media at regular intervals. B. The central government and the state government officers, including the police officers and the members of judicial services, are given periodic sensitization and awareness training on the issues addressed by this act. C. Effective coordination between the services provided by concerned ministers and departments dealing with law, home affairs, including law and order, health, and human resources to address issues of domestic violence is established and periodical review of the same is conducted. D. Protocols for the various ministers concerned with the delivery of services to women under this act, including the courts, are prepared and put in place. Now, Chapter 4 is on procedure and for obtaining orders of reliefs. Section 12 is about the complaint, which is normally used in Domestic Violence Act, complaint under Section 12 of Domestic Violence Act 2005. Section 12 says application to magistrate. An aggrieved person or a protection officer or any other person on behalf of the aggrieved person may present an application to the magistrate seeking one or more reliefs under this act, provided that before passing any order on such application, the magistrate shall take into consideration any domestic incident report received by him from the protection officer or the service provider. The relief sought for under subsection 1 may include a relief for issuance of an order of payment of compensation or damages without prejudice to the rights of such person to institute a suit for compensation or damages for the injuries caused by the acts of domestic violence committed by the respondent, provided that where a decree for any amount as compensation or damages has been passed by any court in favor of the aggrieved person, the amount, if any, paid or payable in pursuance of the order made by the magistrate under this act shall be set off against the amount payable under such decree, and the decree shall, notwithstanding anything contained in the CPC 1908 or any other law for the time being in force, be executable for the balance amount, if any, left after such set off. 3. Every application under subsection 1 shall be in such form and contain such particulars as may be prescribed or as nearly as possible thereto. The magistrate shall fix the first date of hearing, which shall not ordinarily be beyond 3 days from the date of receipt of the application by the court. The magistrate shall endeavour to dispose of every application made under subsection 1 within a period of 60 days from the date of its first hearing. Section 13. Service of notice. A notice of the date of hearing fixed under subsection section 12 shall be given by the magistrate to the protection officer, who shall get it served by such means as may be prescribed on the respondent and on any other person as directed by the magistrate within a maximum period of 2 days or such further reasonable time as may be allowed by the magistrate from the time of its receipt. A declaration of service of notice made by protection officer in such form as may be prescribed shall be proof that such notice was served upon the respondent and on any other person as directed by the magistrate unless the contrary is proved. Section 14. Counselling. The magistrate may at any stage of the proceedings under this act direct the respondent or the aggrieved person either singly or jointly to undergo counselling with any members or a service provider who possesses such qualifications and experience in counselling as may be prescribed. Second, where the magistrate has issued any direction under subsection 1, he shall fix the next date of hearing of the case within a period not exceeding 2 months. Section 15. Assistance of welfare expert. In any proceeding under this act, the magistrate may secure the services of such person, preferably a woman, whether related to the aggrieved person or not, including a person who engaged in promoting family welfare as he thinks fit for the purpose of assisting him in discharging his functions. Section 16. Proceedings to be held in camera. If the magistrate considers that the circumstances of the case so warrant, and if either party to the proceedings so desires, he may conduct the proceedings under this act in camera. Now, section 17. Right to reside in shared household. This is also a very important section. Notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being in force, every woman in a domestic relationship shall have the right to reside in the shared household, whether or not she has any right, title, or beneficial interest in the same. Second, the aggrieved party shall not be evicted or excluded from the shared household or any part of it by the respondent save in accordance with the procedure established by law. So normally what the father-in-law, the mother-in-law do is they file a suit for injunction, before taking out the wife, their daughter-in-law. So that's what the law is. That's what they're saying. Section 18. Protection orders. The magistrate may, after giving the aggrieved person and the respondent an opportunity of being heard, and on being prima facie satisfied that the domestic violence has taken place or is likely to take place, pass a protection order in favor of the aggrieved person and prohibit the respondent from committing any act of domestic violence, aiding or abetting in the commission of acts of domestic violence, entering the place of employment of the aggrieved person, or if the person aggrieved is a child, its school or any other place frequented by the aggrieved person, attempting to communicate in any form whatsoever with the aggrieved person, including personal, oral or written or electronic or telephonic contact. E. Alienating any assets, operating bank lockers or bank accounts used or held or enjoyed by both the parties, jointly by the aggrieved person and the respondent or singly by the respondent, including her stridhan or any other property held jointly by the parties or separately by them without the leave of the magistrate. F. Causing violence to the dependents, other relatives, or any person who gave the aggrieved person assistance from domestic violence. G. committing any other act as specified in the protection order. Now coming to section 19, that is residence orders. While disposing of an application under subsection 1 of section 12, the magistrate may, on being satisfied that the domestic violence has taken place, pass a residence order. A. Restraining the respondent from dispossessing or in any other manner disturbing the possession of the aggrieved person from the shared household, whether or not the respondent has a legal or equitable interest in the shared household. B. Directing the respondent to remove himself from the shared household. C. Restraining the respondent or any of his relatives from entering any portion of the shared household in which the aggrieved person resides. D. Restraining the respondent from alienating or disposing of the shared household or encumbering the same. E. Restraining the respondent from renouncing his rights in the shared household except with the leave of the magistrate. F. Directing the respondent to secure same level of alternate accommodation for the aggrieved person as enjoyed by her in the shared household or to pay rent for the same if the circumstances so require, provided that no other order under clause B shall be passed against any person who is a woman. Now, second, the magistrate may impose any additional conditions or pass any other direction which he may deem reasonably necessary to protect or to provide for the safety of the aggrieved person or any child of such aggrieved person. 3. The magistrate may require from the respondent to execute a bond with or without sureties for preventing the commission of domestic violence. 4. An order under subsection 3 shall be deemed to be an order under Chapter 8 of the CRPC 1973 and shall be dealt with accordingly. 5. While passing an order under subsection 1, subsection 2 or subsection 3, the court may also pass an order directing the officer in charge of the nearest police station to give protection to the aggrieved person or to assist her or the person making an application on her behalf in the implementation of the order. While making an order under subsection 1, the magistrate may impose on the respondent obligations relating to the discharge of the rent and other payments having regard to the financial needs and resources of the parties. 7th, the magistrate may direct the officer in charge of the police station in whose jurisdiction the magistrate has been approached to assist in the implementation of the protection order. 8th, the magistrate may direct the respondent to return to the possession of the aggrieved person her stridhan or any other property or valuable security to which she is entitled to. Now, section 20 talks about monetary reliefs. While disposing of an application under subsection 1 of section 12, the magistrate may direct the respondent to pay monetary relief to meet the expenses incurred and losses suffered by the aggrieved person and any child of the aggrieved person as a result of the domestic violence, and such relief may include but is not limited to the loss of earnings, the medical expenses, the loss caused due to the destruction damage or removal of any property from the control of the aggrieved person, the maintenance for the aggrieved person as well as her children, if any, including an order or in addition to an order of maintenance under section 125 of CRPC 1973 or any other law for the time being in force. The monetary relief granted under this section shall be adequate, fair and reasonable and consistent with the standard of living to which the aggrieved person is accustomed. The magistrate shall have the power to order an appropriate lump sum payment or monthly payments of maintenance as the nature and circumstances of the case may require. The magistrate shall send a copy of the order for monetary relief made under subsection 1 of the to the parties to the application and to the in charge of the police station within the local limits of whose jurisdiction the respondent resides. The respondent shall pay the monetary relief granted to the aggrieved person within the period specified in the order or under subsection 1. Upon the failure on part of the respondent to make payment in terms of the order under subsection 1, the magistrate may direct the employer or a debtor of the respondent to directly pay to the aggrieved person to deposit with the court a portion of the wages or salaries or debt due to or accrued to the credit of the respondent, which may amount which amount may be adjusted towards the monetary relief payable by the respondent. Now, section 21, custody orders. Notwithstanding anything contained in any other law for the time being enforced, the magistrate may, at any stage of hearing of the application for protection orders or for any other relief under this Act, grant temporary custody of any child or children to the aggrieved persons or the person making an application on her behalf, and specify, if necessary, the arrangements for visit of such child or children by the respondent, provided that if the magistrate is of the opinion that any visit of the respondent may be harmful to the interests of the child or children, the magistrate shall refuse to allow such visit. Section 22, compensation orders. In addition to other reliefs as may be granted under this Act, the magistrate may, on an application being moved by the aggrieved person, pass an order directing the respondent to pay compensation and damages for the injuries, including mental torture and emotional distress caused by the facts of domestic violence committed by the respondent. Now, section 23 talks about power to grant interim and ex parte orders. In any proceedings before him under this Act, the magistrate may pass such interim orders as he deems fit and proper. If the magistrate is satisfied that an application prima facie discloses that the respondent is committing or has committed an act of domestic violence, or that there is a likelihood that the respondent may commit an act of domestic violence, he may grant an ex parte order on the basis of the affidavit in such form as may be prescribed of the aggrieved person under section 18, 19, section 20, section 21, or as the case may be, section 22 against the respondent. Section 24 says, court to which copies of the order, court to give copies of order free of cost. The magistrate shall, in all cases where he has passed any order under this Act, order that a copy of such order shall be given free of cost to the parties to the application, the police officer in charge of the police station in the jurisdiction of which the magistrate has been approached, and any service provider located within the local limits of the jurisdiction of the court, and if any service provider has a registered domestic incident report to that service provider. That this is talking about the copy of service which supplies as free of cost. Now, section 25, duration and alteration of orders. A protection order made under section 18 shall be in force till the aggrieved person applies for discharge. If the magistrate, on receipt of an application from the aggrieved person or the respondent, is satisfied that there is a change in the circumstances requiring alteration, modification, or revocation of any order made under this Act, he may, for reasons to be recorded in writing, pass such order as he may deem appropriate. Section 26, relief in other suits and legal proceedings. Any relief available under sections 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 may also be sought in any legal proceedings before a civil court, family court, or a criminal court affecting the aggrieved person and the respondent, whether such proceeding was initiated before or after the commencement of this Act. Any relief referred to in subsection 1 may be sought for an addition to and along with any other relief that the aggrieved person may seek in such suit or legal proceedings before a civil or criminal court. In case any relief has been obtained by the aggrieved person in any proceedings other than a proceeding under this Act, she shall be bound to inform the magistrate of the grant of such relief. Now, section 27 talks about jurisdiction. The Court of Judicial Magistrate of the first class or the Metropolitan Magistrate, which is in Delhi, as the case may be, within the local limits of which a. the person aggrieved permanently or temporarily resides or carries on business or is employed, or b. the respondent resides or carries on business or is employed, or c. the cause of action has arisen, shall be the competent court to grant protection order or other orders under this act and to try offences under this act. Second, any order made under this act shall be enforceable throughout India. Now, section 28, that's procedure. Save as otherwise provided in the act, all proceedings under section 12, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23 and offences under section 31 be governed by the provisions of CRPC 1973. Nothing in subsection 1 shall prevent from the court from laying down its own procedure for disposal of an application under section 12 or under subsection 2 of section 23. Now coming to section 29, talks about appeal. There shall lie an appeal to the court of session within 30 days from the date on which the order made by the magistrate is served on the aggrieved person or the respondent, as the case may be, whichever is later. Now section 30 talks about its miscellaneous. These are the chapter 5 miscellaneous provisions. Section 30 is about protection officers and members of service providers to be public servants. The protection officers and members of service providers, while acting or purporting to act in pursuance of any of the provisions of this act or any rules or orders made thereunder, shall be deemed to be public servants within the meaning of section 21 of the IPC 1860. Section 31, penalty for breach of protection order by respondent. This is talking about the breach. A breach of protection order or of an interim protection order by the respondent shall be an offence under this act and shall be punishable with imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 1 year, or with fine which may extend to 20,000 rupees, or with both. Second, the offence under subsection 1 shall, as far as practicable, be tried by the magistrate who has passed the order, the breach of which has been alleged to have been caused by the accused. Third, while framing charges under subsection 1, the magistrate may also frame charges under section 498A of the IPC 1860 or any other provisions of the code or the Dowry Prohibition Act 1961, as the case may be, if the facts disclose the commission of an offence under those provisions. Now section 32, cognizance and proof. Notwithstanding anything contained in the CRPC 1973, the offence under subsection 1 of the section 31 shall be cognizable and non-bailable. Upon the sole testimony of the aggrieved person, the court may conclude that an offence under subsection 1 of section 31 has been committed by the accused. Now section 33, penalty for not discharging duty by protection officer. If any protection officer fails or refuses to discharge his duties as directed by the magistrate in the protection order without any sufficient cause, he shall be punished with imprisonment or of either description for a term which may extend to 1 year, or with fine which may extend to 20,000 rupees, or with both. So protection officer is also under the purview of punishment if he doesn't discharge his duties. Now section 34 is cognizable of offences committed by protection officers. No prosecution or other legal proceeding shall lie against the protection officer unless a complaint is filed with the previous sanction of the state government or an officer authorized by it in this behalf. Now section 35, protection of action taken in good faith. No suit, prosecution, or other legal proceedings shall lie against the protection officer for any damage caused or likely to be caused by anything which is in good faith done or intended to be done under this act or any rule or orders made thereunder. Now section 36, act not in derogation of any other law. The provisions of this act shall be in addition to and not in derogation of the provisions of any other law for the time being in force. Now, section 37, this is about the powers of central government to make rules. The central government may, by notification, make rules for carrying out the provisions of this act, in particular and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing power. Such rules may be provided for all or any of the following matters, namely, the qualifications and experience which a protection officer shall possess under subsection 2 of section 8, the terms and conditions of the service of the protection officers and other officers subordinate to him under subsection 3 of section 8, the form and manner in which a domestic incident report may be made under clause B of the subsection 1 of section 9, the form and manner in which an application for the protection order may be made to the magistrate under clause C of subsection 1 of section 9, the form in which a complaint is to be filed under clause D of subsection 1 of section 9, the other duties to be performed by the protection officer under clause 1 of the subsection 1 of section 9, the rules regulating registration of service providers under subsection 1 of section 10, the form in which an application under subsection 1 of section 12 seeking relief under this act may be made, and the particulars which such application shall contain under subsection 3 of that section, the means of the serving notices under subsection 1 of section 13, the form of declaration of service of notice to be made by protection officer under subsection 2 of section 13, the qualification and experience in counseling which a member of the service provider shall possess under subsection 1 of section 14, the form in which an affidavit may be filed by the aggrieved person under subsection 2 of section 23, any other matter which has to be or may be prescribed. Now, lastly, every rule made under this act shall be laid as soon as may be after it is made before each House of Parliament, which it is in session for a total period of 30 days, which may be comprised in one session or in two or more successive sessions, and it before the expiry of the session immediately following the session of the successive sessions aforesaid, both houses agree on making any modification in the rule, or both houses agree that the rule should not be made, the rule shall thereafter have effect only in such modified form or to be of no effect as the case may be. However, that any such modification or annulment shall be without prejudice to the validity of anything previously done under that rule. Now, there are certain amendments made which I will be discussing in my next video. So I hope I have nicely done my job, and Domestic Violence Act should be very clear to you. And thank you so much for hearing me, and have a very, very good day. Thank you.